Hi, and welcome to episode two. Today we're going to be talking all about college and my college experience. I touched on some of this in the first episode when I talked about my bipolar diagnosis because I was diagnosed in college. It led to a bunch of other stuff. But also I'm going to give kind of a background on like why I graduated early. Um, there was like another situation I briefly touched on that I'm going to go more in depth today. Also, full transparency, I already recorded this like a few days ago, and then I had therapy the next day and like talked about the things I talked about during the recording, and just like my perspective kind of changed on some things. So I just wanted to redo it so I felt fully confident in what I was saying and that it was like true to what I think. But, anyways, I'm going to start kind of in chronological order. So, I'm going to do a brief description of freshman, sophomore, and junior year, which ended up being my last year, and kind of just going through like big things that happened each year that kind of like shaped my experience for that year. But I do want to give a little background. So, for starters, I went to school at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I was an architecture major, so I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Architecture. Um, I'm from New York, so I was about 4 hours away from home, and I knew no one when I went to school there. Was my freshman year. I didn't get to go to campus my first semester because it was COVID. I graduated high school in 2020, so I was like the COVID class. And like a week before my college move-in date, we got an email that the campus was going to remain closed and all of our classes would be online. So that first semester, I stayed home and it wasn't terrible in the sense of like I was by myself because a lot of my friends' campuses also closed down. So most of my friends from home were still here anyways. Um, but it was hard because, like, if you knew me my senior year of high school, all I wanted to do was leave my hometown. Like, I was so excited to go to school and just, like, go somewhere where I literally didn't know anyone. Not for any particular reason. Like, high school wasn't terrible for me, like, at all. Like, obviously, high school has its challenges. But I had, like, a pretty average high school experience. Like, I wouldn't go back, but, like, nothing terrible happened either. I was just ready for, like, a change and to, like, meet new people. And especially going through COVID, I had been stuck in my house for months. Like, I was excited to kind of like get some space from my family, love them to death, but like we were sick of each other. So yeah, first semester was at home. Second semester, I was able to go to campus and move into a dorm. Not everybody at the school was able to move in. I know it was like mostly freshmen and like people who had courses that were like required to be on campus, like labs and such. I went to a really big school, so I just think it was like a safety thing because COVID was still around. So moved in my spring semester freshman year to a dorm. I had the dorm room to myself. I think pretty much almost everybody did. I think there were a couple people who had roommates. But because not everyone was on the campus, they like had us room individually also for like COVID reasons. Um, so yeah, I went there. I literally knew no one. I ended up meeting a group of friends very quickly, who were in my dorm building. Ended up staying friends with them like the whole time I was at school, which I'll get into a little bit later. And yeah, most of my classes were online. I think I had one in person class that semester. It was like an art studio, so you had to wear like a mask and a face shield, and we were all distanced in the room. But I met a couple people in my major, and yeah, freshman year was pretty anticlimactic. But I do want to kind of give like advice for each year or just like things I wish I did or like things that helped me during each year. So my advice for freshman year, and I think I also struggled with this because it was COVID. I wish that I branched out more and like met more people and didn't kind of just like settle on the first group of friends that I had. Nothing against them. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, I wish I wasn't friends with them. It was just like we had very different interests. And I think if we weren't in COVID, I would have found people with similar interests earlier into being in college. Um, so if you're going into college, I would like definitely recommend like kind of giving yourself time before you settle down. I know it feels like everyone has their friends immediately, but like I said, I knew no one going to school and like even people who like some of my friends that I made had people from their high school and like they didn't talk. Kind of going along with that, I would say if you can like like I said, I had COVID so I couldn't do this. But join like clubs. Everyone's gonna think it's like weird or like I don't know. I was kind of nervous to join clubs, one because I didn't know anybody. Um, and like in high school, I feel like joining clubs, there was really only like academic clubs, and so it just kind of like looked like you were like kind of being like a kiss ass a little bit. Sorry, my dog just woke up. Um, but there are so many clubs and colleges that are just like purely based on like interest and hobby. And I think you can really find like people you connect with really well in that. And also like you can join academic clubs. Like that's obviously going to help you in the long run. All right, moving into sophomore year. I ended up having a random roommate this year in another dorm, and it was amazing. Like me and her got along so well. Like had literally like no issues living together, except for the fact that my alarm would go off like multiple times that I wouldn't hear. So I'm sure she wanted to kill me for that, and we've like joked about it. But we genuinely had like no issues living together. Got along super well. Are still friends. And yeah, sophomore year was probably my favorite year of college. I think one because my living situation was so good. Um, and also it was like kind of my freshman year because of COVID. So this was the year me and my friends like were partying more and going out to frats and house parties and like actually meeting more people because we could. So it was a lot of fun. But I also really struggled with anxiety this year. Um, this is when I went on medication for anxiety as well. A little bit of a backstory on that. It was actually like the first day of sophomore year, like classes, the first day of class. I had gone to my classes. I remember I didn't even have like the classes I was stressed about that year on the first day. It was like sort of my easier classes. And I was walking across campus back to my dorm after my last class, and my friend from home called me just to kind of like check in and like see how it was. Um, and I had walked to like my car instead of going straight to my dorm room because I had a random roommate. We kind of just met. I didn't want to be on the phone and like annoy her if I was going to be talking to my friend. So I sat down in my car for a little bit and was on the phone. And while I was sitting there, I just remember getting like this like chest pain and just starting to feel really like nauseous and sick. And I told my friend that I was just like started not feeling well and I was gonna go back to my dorm to like lay down and like hopefully it would go away. So I hang up with her and I walk into my dorm building and I like kind of tell my roommate I was just like, oh, like I just like don't feel good. I'm gonna lay down for a few minutes. And I think it was like probably over the span of 20 minutes, I went from like, oh, like something feels off to like I'm in excruciating pain and like I'm scared. And I was scared also to tell my roommate because I didn't want to freak out this poor girl I had just met. So I like crawl out of bed. I was like curled up in a ball in my bed, like crying. And I just like walk out of the room and I go outside of the building and I call my dad and I'm like freaking out, telling him like I'm in so much pain. I feel like I'm having a heart attack and like I don't know what to do. And he told me like you need to go to the emergency room. The issue was is I was the only friend who had a car and I was like I can't drive right now. Like I'm scared I'll pass out if I start driving because I was in that much pain. And I called my friends who lived in the same dorm building as me. Um, I was supposed to live with one of them, but her like housing thing got messed up and she got placed in an actual different building. It was like a whole thing. But majority of our friends lived in the same building. So I called my friends who were roommates and they both came down and I gave them my car keys and they drove me to the hospital and it was like 25 minutes away. Like the hospital wasn't super close to campus. Um, and I go to the hospital and they wait for me to like get checked in. And then I was like, you guys can go. I don't know like how long this will be. Like I'm in the nurses have me now. Like I'll be okay. So I ended up getting blood work done, and this was the first time I'd ever had my blood drawn, and I passed out on the hospital floor and threw up. So now I pass out every time I get my blood drawn, which is not fun. But basically they did a bunch of tests. I had an EKG. They monitored me for a few hours, and everything came back clear and like healthy. And it was just a really bad panic attack, and I had never had a panic attack that bad before. I had panic attacks in high school, um, where I like, felt like I couldn't breathe or I was just like really shaky, but I'd never had chest pain like that. And so that's why I like freaked out and went to the emergency room. But everything was fine. My friends came and picked me back up, and I just like, went to bed. Um, yeah. The only other thing I would say about sophomore year is for my major specifically, I don't even know if it's just my major or like my school, but it was like known that sophomore year was like the hardest year. And it was when you started taking like your classes for your major, which is common in most majors. But there was like a really steep learning curve for architecture because we also had like, we were learning like the material, like the educational part of it, but we were also like expected to learn all these softwares on top of it. And it was just a lot. And it was also the year they tried to like weed you out. So I think I just had a lot of anxiety going into that. Um, but yeah, other than that, sophomore year, nothing too crazy happened. I like had like a low key friend drama thing going on with a friend from home, but I don't need to get into that right now. As for advice for sophomore year, I would say definitely prioritize your interests and what you actually like doing. Um, I feel like sophomore year you kind of get into a routine, and like this is really when you kind of solidify that friend group. And I feel like sophomore year I was kind of running around with my head chopped off a little bit. Because I was just trying to like please everyone that I was friends with, like trying to become closer to people in my major, but like stay friends with the people I met freshman year. But like I was also doing a club sport, so I was like getting close to them and hanging out with them. And it was just my schedule was like so loaded and hectic that I wish I had cut out the things that I didn't love and like stuck with the things that I really enjoyed a bit more. Um, Additionally, like really reflect on like who you're surrounding yourself with because like I said, like not always is the case and you can obviously change this at any point in time, but like sophomore year, I feel like for most people you really solidify that friend group. Um and just make sure that you're surrounded by people that you enjoy being around and like have your best interests at heart. And sophomore year, I feel like I did that. And like things can change. Like I'm not saying they're gonna be your forever friends or anything. Um, but just kind of evaluate like if you're happy with the people you're around. Cause I know like not at my school literally, but some of my friends from home. I remember this time like my other friends having a really hard time with this. And like feeling like they were stuck in a group that they didn't quite fit with. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but um the other thing is I feel like sophomore year I was partying a lot, which was fun, but I also feel like some of my favorite nights were the nights where like me and my roommate would literally walk down the street to like the pizza place and get like mozzarella sticks and pizza or like whatever we wanted, go back to the dorm room and just like binge a movie or like American Horror Story all night and just like hang out and have a chill night in. So like don't feel like bad about not wanting to go out. Or if you don't like going out at all, like honestly, sometimes it gave me so much anxiety, like especially in frats and stuff, like you just don't know what's gonna happen. So definitely enjoy your nights in and like let yourself recharge because college is a very go, go, go environment and like you need a night here and there to kind of reel yourself back in. All right, now we're gonna get into junior year, and this is where things started going downhill for me. And I'm also nervous to talk about this because I just want to make it really clear like, I am not bashing the people involved in this. There's one person that I will bash specifically, and he deserves it, and I will not apologize for that. But everyone else, like, I'm not trying to bash anyone involved. There was like a really hard situation to deal with, um, that I'm gonna talk about. For us to talk about this, to be honest, because it's still pretty fresh. It's only been a couple months ish since some of this stuff happened, so just bear with me while I like figure out what I'm comfortable saying about this. So, junior year, me and three of my friends moved into an off campus apartment. It was only like a 5-minute drive from campus, probably not even that long. And me and three of my roommates had an apartment, and then our guy friends had an apartment like directly across the yard from us. We were like pretty much door to door, like 15, 20 feet away. And I moved in like 2 or 3 weeks before everyone else just to start working before classes started. And during this time, I also adopted my dog Coda as a therapy dog for my anxiety because my anxiety was so bad the year before. And like I had everyone in the apartment's permission, like we had talked about it, like everyone was on board with having this dog. Um, so yeah, everything was going pretty good. Classes started like late August, early September. Everything was going really good. I was having a lot of fun. We were like going out, having people over at the apartment. We had the puppy, and he was like an angel at first. Like potty training obviously took its time, but um, he was doing pretty good. And then October rolled around, and there was like a little bit of issue within the friend group from the summer, because on for my birthday, my 20th birthday, I invited all of my friends from school, like my close friends and my close friends from home, up to the St. Lawrence River where my family camps every summer, for like a little weekend trip. So we rented out a house, like an Airbnb, and I was like, I think there was like 10 or 12 of us. I don't remember exactly. Who had all came up for the weekend. And, we had the house, we would like party, drink at night. And then during the day, we went over to the camp where my parents were. And like I would take my friends out on the jet skis or they'd be at the beach. Just like it was a pretty chill weekend, like nothing too crazy, but we were all just hanging out. And during this weekend, there was an incident where this one kid, I don't even want to call him my friend because, like, we were never close. And honestly, like, we only really talked because my friend and his friend were dating. Um, but, anyways, I don't need to get into, like, the full details of everything. So, this kid, we'll call him Jeff. He was there that weekend, and there was a little incident where he made like two of my home friends really uncomfortable to where I had to like step in and say something. And like my one friend had to be like moved from sleeping downstairs where he was to like sleeping upstairs with me, just because she was uncomfortable and completely like understandable. He had made like some uncomfortable comments. So moving back to October, it had kind of caused a rift between him and one of our other friends at school because he blamed the incident on her, saying she was saying stuff that wasn't true, which was not the case at all. Like, she fully was in her right. Like, everyone knew what had happened. Um, so this like one weekend in October, it was like a long weekend. It was just me, my one roommate, our friend, and this kid Jeff. And our friend and Jeff kind of got like they had like a conversation to kind of clear the air this one morning. Later that night, I went over to my other friend's house from my like major. It was her 21st birthday. Went to her house for her birthday. And my roommate had came and picked me up later that night because it was October. It was cold. I was in like a mini dress. Um, and she had came and picked me up, drove me back to the apartment. It was like 5 minutes away. And we pull into the parking lot, and they kind of tell me that this kid Jeff, they haven't seen him all day since they talked, but they think he's in the apartment kind of drinking by himself all day. And we could like see in the windows, it was like floor to ceiling windows on the end, so we could see that he was in there drinking. and it was kind of known that he had like a bit of a drinking issue. Nothing crazy at this point, but like enough to just like want to make sure he was okay and wasn't still upset about whatever beef he had with our friend earlier that morning. And they were nervous to go in there in case he was upset. So I said I would go in and just like make sure he wasn't still mad because I was kind of like the mediator of the conversation, anyways, earlier in the day. So I didn't see an issue. I was just going to go in, double check that like he was fine and didn't have any other things he wanted to talk about with her. So I walk into the apartment and he is sitting at the kitchen table. There's a couple empty beer bottles. He's smoking a bowl, and there's like the big handle of Tito's is on the table, and there's only about like an inch left in it. And like I don't know how much it was when he started, but I just remember that kind of like being the situation when I walked in. And I walked in, and he was just like asking how the party was, um, and we were just kind of chit chatting, and then I was just checking in, making sure he was like not upset with our friend anymore. Um, and he was definitely drunk, but I wasn't like concerned yet. And we talked for like probably like 20 minutes or so, and then he kind of made a comment. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was about our friend. And he was definitely still a little pissed off, and he took the empty beer bottle and like threw it at the ground, and it kind of bounced along the floor across the like living room. And that's when I was like, oh, okay, he's like drunk. Like, he should just go to bed. Like, we don't need to talk about this right now. He's just going to get too upset. So I told him, I was like, oh, like, you should just go to bed. Like, it was already probably like 2 ish in the morning. And I was just like, oh, like, we don't need to talk about this. Like, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Just get some sleep. So he stands up and immediately kind of like falls over into the wall. The wall was like right next to him, so he didn't like get hurt or anything. But he immediately like stumbled, and then I kind of walked over to like kind of like help him back up and was just like, okay, like just sleep on the couch because his bedroom was upstairs and I knew I wasn't going to be able to get him up the stairs. He could barely hold up his own body weight. I don't know his exact height, but like I'm 5'2" and like he's maybe, I feel like stupid for saying this, but like maybe 6 foot. I don't know. He's like taller. And also like a bigger build guy. So there was no way I was going to be able to carry him up the stairs. And so I had gotten him over to the couch. He was stumbling pretty bad. And as soon as he sat down on the couch, he told me he was going to throw up. And so I was like, okay, like, do you think you can make it to the bathroom? The bathroom was like directly in front of the couch, like maybe like 10 feet away. Um, and so I help him to the bathroom. He immediately like sits on the ground and starts throwing up in the toilet. And he threw up a little bit and then wanted to go back to the couch. And for a while, it was back and forth between the couch and the bathroom. Sorry, I should have like put a disclaimer if like talking about throw up is gonna freak you out. I'm so sorry. But back and forth between the couch and the bathroom for a while. Then he's in the bathroom and he's just like constantly throwing up, like not stopping. And he's getting like a little bit more out of it and upset and like not really making a ton of sense. And I call his roommate who was home that weekend, and I just kind of ask one to call him to like let him know what's going on, and like kind of ask what I should do because they were best friends in high school, so like he knows him better than I do. Um, and also just like, is there anything like crackers, Gatorade, something I can give him because he's throwing up like an excessive amount. And he told me that there was crackers upstairs in his bedroom. So I went upstairs, grabbed the crackers, come back down, and I tried to like give them to him. Like I had unwrapped, they were like saltines. I had unwrapped them and grabbed a couple and like stuck my hand out to give them to him. To say like you should eat something to kind of like absorb it up and like help your stomach. And he had like swatted my hand away and the crackers like kind of like flew or whatever. And this is when things started escalating. He got really upset and started yelling and flinging his arms around. He wasn't really making sense. Um, I just remember he was like ranting about our friend and he was like clearly so upset about it. And then he was like saying that I hurt people because people hurt me. Like just stuff along those lines. And I like started getting like a little freaked out. So I was like, okay, like you just need to go to sleep. Like, let's get you to bed. So he stood up and like kind of like wobbled over to the couch. And at this point, I noticed that there was like a knife on the ottoman, like like in front of the couch. And it wasn't, it was like the big knife from like the butcher block. And so I was just like, okay, like he was kind of talking about like hurting himself a little bit at this point. So I was just like, I'm just gonna go move that. And I put it in the kitchen, and I also got like a mixing bowl to give to him in case he had to throw up. Because I was gonna give him the bowl and like head out and just be like, you need to go to bed. Um, and I like reach out to give him the bowl, and he grabs my wrist and pulls me down on the couch. And he was just like, can you hold it? Like, I'm gonna throw up. And so I was just sitting there, and I was like, okay, like I'll hold the bowl for a minute. And then all of a sudden he like flips around and is now on top of me. And like I said before, he is a lot bigger than me, a lot taller than me, like, and he was not like really in control of his body. So I get really uncomfortable and freaked out, and he starts getting pretty touchy. And I like kind of like pushed him off of me and stood up, and he grabs me again, pulls me back down again, gets back like on top of me. And so this time I just remember like I really hate talking about this. So this time I'm under him. I like slide off the couch, and I am like freaked out. He's still kind of screaming and stuff as this is going on. So I like run out the door of his apartment, run across the yard to our apartment, and my roommate was like in her room, I'm pretty sure. And I was like yelling her name to like get her to come out. I was like crying. And she was obviously startled and was asking me what was going on. And I like briefly told her, I was like, he's out of control. I'm not going back over there. Like, he's so drunk. He's filling his arms around. I'm not going over there. And I remember her asking, does he need help? Like, what do we do? And I was like, yeah, like, he probably does. Like, he is like throwing up constantly. He's really drunk. He's talking about hurting himself. Like, he probably does need help, but like, I'm not going over there because he's freaking aggressive. And she was gonna go over, and I just was like, please be careful and keep your distance. And then our friend was over our apartment, and she also came out and went over there and was like talking to me. And I called my friend from home crying hysterically about what had just happened. And she was like, you need to call the cops because one, he's either gonna hurt himself or someone else, and also he could have like alcohol poisoning from like how much he drank and how much he's been throwing up. So our friend calls 911 while I'm on the phone with my friend, like freaking out. And my roommate is inside the apartment, like kind of at a distance, trying to talk him down. I just remember the ambulance getting there and kind of asking, like who was in the apartment with him. And I, said it was me, and I went inside with them, and they kind of asked me to like give them a rundown, tell them how much I had saw him drink, and like everything, and like the knife, and explain kind of everything that had just happened um with him. And I didn't make the phone call to the like I didn't call 911, so I don't know exactly what was said. But at this point, I hadn't really told my roommates like how physical he had gotten with me because I was flustered and I was just like, don't know what the fuck to do. And so that like information wasn't really made to the police, and I just kind of told them like he was being really aggressive and like I didn't feel safe. Um, and so I just remember the most frustrating thing of this was as soon as the police walked in, he was still on the couch. He had sobered up so quickly and acted like he was fine. He was still slurring his words, like you could still tell he was drunk, but he was putting on a show for them 100%. And they were like introducing themselves, asking him how he was. And he was like, oh, yeah, I'm fine. Just had a little to drink. Like, I'm fine. I just need to go to sleep or like eat or whatever he said. And I was just sitting there like in disbelief. I was like, you have to be fucking kidding me. Like 2 minutes ago, you were hysterical and like losing it. And so after I kind of talked to the police, tell them what was going on, he talks to the police. They asked me to go get him shoes and like a jacket because they had to take him to the hospital to make sure he was okay. And also because he was like talking a little bit about self harm. They had to monitor him. So they were like, "Do you mind?" And I was kind of like, "Okay, like I don't really want to be in this apartment, but if it gets him out of here." So I went up and I grabbed his coat and some shoes, and then he couldn't get his shoes on, and he asked me to help him, and I was just like, "I'm not helping you." And the police officer kind of stepped in and she helped him get the shoes on. And then I remember them having him stand up and they had to like pat him down. And after that, they were like, "All right, like we're gonna take him like from here." He looked at me and he was like, "Come on, Meg, like one more hug." And I was just like, "Are you out of your fucking like no, absolutely not." And he kept saying, I was just like, "No." And I stepped back and I think this is when like the female officer kind of realized like how uncomfortable I was. And she literally stepped in between us, put her arm down, and was like, "Nope, we're leaving." Um, and so they took him to the hospital. Me and my roommates and our friend went back to our apartment, and like we had like a little. We talked for like a few minutes, but it was probably like 3 a.m. at the time, and I had to go to work the next day at 8 a.m. And I was just like like in shock and exhausted, and everyone was kind of like, "What the fuck just happened?" And I was just like, "I need to go shower and go to bed. Like I don't even know." And there was nothing else we could do at that point, so we were just like, "Okay, like yeah, we'll talk tomorrow. Like we all just need to get some sleep." And so I go to take a shower, bawl my eyes out in the shower, go to bed, cry myself to sleep because I was just so like in shock and freaked out, and like it was just a really tough night. And the next morning, I wake up. I'm about to walk out the door to go to work, and I get a phone call from the hospital. And it's a nurse asking me if he can come back. And I was just like, "Well, like, is he, like, what do you think? Like, is he fine?" And she was like, "Yeah, he says he just was upset last night and he doesn't plan to do anything. And he's sobered up now. Like, he's fine. Can you come get him? He gave us you as, like, the contact." Because apparently all he remembered was me showing up at the apartment and then like the police getting there. And I was just like, "I'm sorry, like I can't, like I'm going into work, like here's my roommate's number, like you can try her." So I text my roommate that they're probably gonna call her and that I have to go to work. Um, as I pull into work, my other roommate who was not there this night, she was home with her family, calls me freaking out, just kind of confused about what had happened and like how things escalated, and was just like, "Why did you call the cops? He was just drunk. Like, why did it turn into this big thing?" And I was just like, "I'm already late for work because the hospital called me. Like, I cannot talk about this right now." And she, asked me again. She was like, "No, can you please just explain? Like, what's going on?" And I was like, "Just call someone. Like, I have to go to work. Like, I'm sorry, I can't talk about this." Went into work, got through the day, come home, and that roommate who had called me is over at the apartment with him because he had gotten brought back. Kind of talking to him, I guess. And when I got to our apartment, my roommate and our friend who were there that night were there. And I kind of filled them in on the extent of how physical he had gotten with me. And they were like, "He doesn't remember any of that. He says he remembers you showing up, him throwing up a bunch, and then the cop showing up." And so I made it very clear. I was like, "I don't want to talk to him. I'm not going over there." And my roommate was like, "Well, someone needs to tell him," and also our other roommate, what had happened. Um, and so she offered to go over and kind of explain it all on like my behalf because I was not comfortable going over there. And she did that, and then after that he wanted to apologize, but I was just like, I don't even care to hear it. Like, nothing excuses that behavior. Like, no. He ended up texting me like a paragraph. I never responded. And then I made it really clear to everyone that I did not want him in our apartment. I didn't want to be around him, and like that was that. And everyone respected that for a while. Um, and then like after about a week, my one roommate, she was dating this guy's best friend, and they lived right there. So I get it was a complicated situation, and it was hard for us not all to be able to like hang out like normal because I didn't want him there. She kind of started asking me like, "How long do you think until you'll be comfortable with him being around?" And it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I just remember kind of being surprised she was asking me that so soon. And I understand she was in a tough position too. Um, but I think it was too soon. And kept kind of like bringing it up, and like understand it was a difficult situation. It wasn't ideal, but also like I had every right to like not want him in the apartment and not want to be around him. So after about like a week or two for kind of like asking, I was just like, fine, he can come to our bachelor night, but I don't want to talk to him. I want him on the other side of the room, and I don't want him drinking. And they had already told me that he had like quit drinking, and he was felt really bad about the whole thing. Was like gonna be better and blah blah blah, whatever excuses he made. So he comes over the night for bachelor. I sit in the corner, and I can just like feel him like kind of like looking at me every now and then, and I just like avoided eye contact like so hard. Like I literally pretend he didn't exist. I was just really uncomfortable that he was there, but like I agreed to it. I'm pretty sure I like left early and just went back to my bed because I was just like miserable. Um, but yeah, and then a couple of days later, I get a phone call from my parents that my grandpa is going to the hospital and like most likely only has a couple more days. So I pack up all my stuff and leave the next morning to go home. And once I get home, I was dealing with like, grief, like my grandpa, he only made it a few days. And then we were, doing the funeral services and stuff. And I was just it's kind of hard to explain because obviously I was having a really hard time. Like I was very close to my grandpa and it was very hard. He had Parkinson's disease, so it was really hard to see him kind of in his final state. And also just he had had it my whole life. Like I'd always seen him struggle. Um, so it was hard to see that. And then it was also like kind of a relief being home because I felt so much safer here. I think it didn't really hit me how uncomfortable I was at the apartment until I left. Because I was not sleeping while I was there. I was scared to like walk outside and run into this kid. And I had my dog there, so I constantly was, going outside to walk him. And I was always nervous I was going to run into him. And there was like a couple close calls. And I just felt so much better once I was home that I was kind of just like, I don't think I'm ready to go back. There was only like a few weeks left in the semester. And so I kind of like told my parents what had happened with this kid and that, I think it would be best if I stayed home for the semester. And I worked it out with my professors to finish online. And I told my roommates, obviously, I wasn't coming back. They understood with everything with like my grandpa and the whole situation with this kid. Like it made sense. This is the same time I started going back to therapy. Um, one, to deal with what had happened with this kid, also to deal with the grief of losing my grandpa, and also very shortly after my grandpa passed away, I had a manic episode. Um, at the time, didn't really know that it was that, but I basically like I don't know. The really like dead giveaway that like I needed help was one day I literally just like was in my room and started like hysterically sobbing and just like I couldn't even catch my breath. And I was just getting so mad and like irritated. And I stormed out of the house. My sister was home and they heard me slam the door. And I like went to like the lake that's nearby. And it was like middle of November. So it was like snowing like crazy that day. And I was in shorts and a t shirt and like Crocs. And I went and I sat in the snow at the lake for like no reason. Like I that's just like where I ended up. I really don't remember much other than my dad kind of calling me and being like, "Where the fuck are you? Like, what are you doing?" And so yeah, I ended up coming back home, and my parents came home from work, and they came downstairs to talk to me, and I was hysterical, and I was just like, I don't know, like I need help, like something's wrong." And my mom kind of brought up the bipolar thing, and then I went to my doctors for it, went into therapy, kind of talked about that thing, also about dealing with the whole situation at school with the guy. And, a little bit later, I was diagnosed with bipolar. So I was home for the rest of the semester, and then it was kind of time to head back for spring semester in January. And I had called my roommate, just kind of see when everyone else was moving back in. And also because I was in therapy, kind of dealing with what happened. that one night with like the kid and the cops, I wanted to talk to them about kind of going back to not being okay with him being at the apartment and not wanting him there. And I just remember being on the phone with her and she was like, "Oh, like you don't know? Like we don't talk to him anymore." And I was just like, what are you talking about?" She's like, "Yeah, like no one told you." And I was like, "Told me what?" And I ended up that on New Year's, everyone was at the apartments. I obviously wasn't, I was home. And he had another incident with another girl where he had like slapped her ass or something. And it was like one of my roommate's childhood best friends. So they had basically like cut him off after that, called his mom and told her that he was, having these issues with drinking and also like mistreating women and stuff. And that was that. So I was definitely relieved to hear that. Not obviously that it happened, but that they were no longer speaking to him. But if I'm being completely honest, it also kind of hurt that it took it happening to someone else for them to take it seriously. And this is something that we have talked about, like I've talked about with them since then. And so now I know that, like, while I was gone that one semester, they were still kind of like thinking about it if it was necessarily the right thing to do. But I didn't know that. All I was seeing was them at bars partying with him and stuff. So it definitely, I was definitely hurt by it for a while. Um, but yeah, anyways, that's kind of not important anymore. So go back for spring semester. We weren't really sure if he was coming back or not because he had kind of ghosted everyone once they had told his mom what was going on. Um, but a couple days before classes started, he had texted his roommate that he was coming back. So then I started getting really nervous, and everyone just assured me that like he was not going to be around. Everything was good for a while. Then there was like some tensions with one of my roommates. She was having some issues with my dog. He didn't really listen to her, and things just kind of escalated. I'm gonna go over this really briefly because I just think it's more respectful not to go into detail because it's still fresh and like it's not just something that involves me. Um, so there were some issues with one of my roommates and my dog. I ended up having like a manic episode and kind of freaking out on everyone to this point, and I was like a real bitch. And I came back and I apologized and like we kind of mended things. Things were okay for a while, and then a few weeks later, I started noticing tensions again. And at this point, I had already decided I was going to graduate early because I was still having a really hard time at the apartment. I wasn't sleeping. I just felt very uncomfortable, and there was nowhere else for me to live senior year. And I also had all my required classes done, so it just made the most sense for me to kind of leave. So, me and my one roommate had gotten into like I don't even know how to explain it. Basically, I had taken my dog home because there was tension with that. And there's only like a month left and I was just really trying to make it to graduation. Like I was doing so poorly. I was not going out. I was staying in my room every night. Like it was just bad. I was doing bad and I couldn't really just the thought of also having like roommate issues on top of it. I was just like I'm going to do whatever I can to make this month go by as easy peasy as possible. So, as much as it sucked, I brought my dog home to my parents to kind of stay with him until I graduated, just to kind of, alleviate the tension in the apartment. And the next morning, I was about to head back to school. Um, and I was on the phone with our apartment complex, kind of talking about like transferring the lease once they had found a new roommate for senior year. And so I texted in our little group chat, that I just got off the phone with them, talk about it, and my one roommate also had just talked to them about it that morning. And so I was like, oh, okay, we can talk about it when I get back. Just like school that later that night. And she was just like, oh, like, is something wrong? Like, is it gonna be hard? And I was just like, no, like it makes more sense to talk about in person than like explain everything over text. And then I would just ask, I was like, "Also, like, I wanna be updated on how it goes, like, finding the new roommate because, like, it's my name on the lease, and ideally, I wanna be off by June when the lease renews." And I had offered to help find a roommate when I had first told them that I was graduating early, and, I understood, like, they wanted to have, like, the say in who it was, so they posted about it, and kinda did it independently. And for some reason, me sending the text that, I wanted to be updated on how it was going really sent off my roommate. And she just took it very harshly and sent this long, nasty paragraph, kind of like bitching me out that I had somehow manipulated them. And just she said a lot of nasty things. And it really caught me off guard because I didn't understand where it was coming from. She was the first person I told. I literally got out of my meeting to declare that I was graduating early and walked downstairs. She was there and I told her. It was just like a whole thing and I don't want to go into great detail, but my other roommate saw the text because she texted this in the group chat and texted me immediately and was like, "I'm so sorry. I don't understand what's going on. Like I don't know what she's talking about." And I was just, like, very caught off guard, but also pissed that once she sent this in the group chat and was saying all these awful things, um, yeah, so I texted her separately and was just like, "Hey, like, not cool of you to do that. I don't know why you're so upset," kind of explained my side of the situation, and she just comes at me with this, like, long text of all these things that have apparently been bothering her. She's just, like, in my opinion, making shit up. Um, she had gone on this whole rant about how I neglected my dog while I was there, which was not the truth. Like, if you know me, you know I love my dog more than literally life itself and like would do anything for him. And obviously having a dog in the apartment, not an ideal situation. She also had never had a dog before, so like the credibility behind her claims just like was not there. And I'd sent it to my other roommates just to be like, "Do you guys feel this way?" And it was not the case. Like they were like, "No, like obviously like a puppy in an apartment is a challenge. Things could have been better, but he was not neglected." And her saying that just like rubbed me the wrong way. Let me tell you, do not come for my dog. I am so protective of him. And I literally responded LMAO. And that was kind of last time we talked. I went back to the apartment that night. She wasn't there. She spent most of the time at her boyfriend's apartment anyways. Um, and I really, like, wasn't that bothered by this message, like, yeah, it sucked, but I was also like, "I'm leaving, like, it really doesn't matter, and I know I'm not really necessarily in the wrong right now." Like, I had been in the past when I had my manic episode and I freaked out on everyone, like, I admitted I was wrong then. I was not wrong in the situation. Um, so I went back to the apartment and was fine. I, like, went, made dinner, and then I was sitting in my room, and I think it kinda hit me then that I didn't have my dog with me anymore. And I was very attached to him. He was literally an emotional support animal for my anxiety. Like, he was my comfort source, like, 1000%. And I was sitting in my room, and it was the first night he wasn't there, and I just started to lose it and started spiraling so bad. I talked about this in my bipolar episode, but basically, this was the night I attempted to take my life, and my sister and my like really close family friends drove 4 hours in the middle of the night, got to me at like 3 in the morning, and then drove me all the way back home to New York because I was gonna like I was trying to hurt myself. So yeah, and then I went home and I went back to the apartment for finals, graduation, packed up my stuff, and I've been home ever since. I went into a really deep depression. Um, yeah, I still talk to my other roommates with the exception of this one. Obviously, hurtful things were said. I don't really think there's a way to come back from that. I have no interest in talking about it anymore. Um, And like I said, I'm not trying to bash, it's just simply what happened and like friendships don't last. Like that's really all there is to it. Now that I don't live there anymore, it doesn't really affect me. So, yeah. Basically my advice for junior year would be picky about your living situation and your environment. If something's not working for you, advocate for yourself. And I wish that my like after the incident that happened with Jeff, the kid, the cops, I wish I really stuck to my guns and was just like, this is unacceptable. He is not going to be around me. And I also wish I made it a little more clear how hurt I was that they stayed friends with him for a while. Um, like I said, now it doesn't really affect me because, I'm not there. Like, it is what it is. Can't really do anything about it. But I wish I stood up for myself more in that situation. And I think if you're in a similar situation, you should stick up for yourself. Also, I think this would be a really good time to figure out your post grad plans because I was starting to do that and then I got caught up in all of this drama and how depressed I was, and I graduated with no post grad plans. Everything worked out. I start my new job in literally 3 days and like everything's gonna be fine, but it was definitely stressful not having a plan. Um, yeah, and also just prioritize your happiness. Like college is a time to, yes, be social and make friends, but it's also like the last time you get to be fully selfish with your time. So, yeah. With all that being said, um, as you can see, college is complicated. If you're in college or you're going into college, like it really just it's not like the movies. Sorry to break it to you, at least it wasn't for me. There are some really good times and I think I am still trying to have a good memory of college even though my like last year ended really poorly. Um but yeah, enjoy it, be picky about it, like really be selfish in your own happiness in a respectful way. Obviously be considerate of those around you, but it's definitely like a really good time to work on yourself and prioritize your own well-being. I feel like that's kind of everything I have to say about that. Once again, not trying to bash anyone that I talked about except for that one kid because he deserves hell. Um, but yeah, that's really all I have. I just kind of wanted to one vent about it because it's been on my mind recently. And I feel like because I was in such a deep depression after graduation, I never fully processed it all. So this definitely was therapeutic to talk about. And also, I feel like it's kind of a helpful backstory to where I am in life now and why all my friends are still in school, but I'm not. And like, just it kind of fills in pieces of the puzzle. But yeah, that's really all I have to say. So thank you for listening if you made it all the way through, and I hope you have a really great day.